asked for a mirror for her bureau so she could decide when it was time to start curling her long hair. Instead of a mirror, she'd gotten the blankets. "Hurry!" Tok called out, "or we won't have time to brush Baba." She stepped around the blanket divider and saw that her brother had come in. "I'm invited to a party." She waved the invitation at him. He looked at her blankly. He wore black-framed glasses that stayed attached to his head with an elastic band Auntie had made. The lenses were so thick his eyes always looked big. Tok clearly didn't understand the significance of her invitation. Finally, he said, "We have to brush Baba. You promised me before you went to school." He looked a little forlorn over the thought that she might have forgotten what she promised him. "Did you clean Baba's brush?" she asked. He held up a clean horse brush. "I'll race you." She let Tok stay one step ahead of her as they ran outside to the stable. "You beat me," she cried as they fell into some hay. Sumiko smiled as Tok jumped up from the hay to brush the horse. Tok really adored Baba. Her nose dripped all the time, but that worked out fine because Tok liked gooey things. Sumiko sat up and looked out the stable door. Her cousins Bull and Ichiro were still tending the flowers, 19-year-old Bull wide and strong, and 23-year-old Ichiro slender and lean, graceful even in his farm clothes. Uncle was working at the far end of the fields among the carnations, which he always liked to take care of himself. The carnations grew in a makeshift, open-field greenhouse, where they were protected from extremes of sun or wind. Uncle was cutting some for tomorrow's wholesale flower market. Ichiro and Bull were pulling weeds among the stalk. Local flower farmers called flowers grown in the field kusabana, weed flowers. Stock were weed flowers that emanated an amazing clove-like fragrance. Of all the flowers her family had ever grown, Sumiko loved them most. Ragged white cheesecloth rippled above parts of the fields. Last spring, Sumiko and Auntie had sewn cheesecloth tarps for the men to hang over the fields to protect the flowers, except the stalk, which didn't need protection. Uncle dreamed of setting up a glass greenhouse someday and growing perfect carnations, but so far that was just talk. Only the wealthier Japanese farmers owned glass greenhouses. Uncle said you could control the elements better with a greenhouse. Perfection was the holy grail to Uncle. Sumiko thought that a lot of the flowers were perfect, but Uncle often looked critically at his carnations and said things like, "They would be perfect if we had a glass greenhouse." He never even considered whether the stalk could reach perfection. After all, they were just weed flowers. Most of the greenhouse growers came from families who'd moved to America before laws were passed preventing those born in Asia from becoming citizens. Uncle and Ji-chan had both been born in Japan. People born in Asia were not allowed to become American citizens, and those who weren't citizens were not allowed to own or lease land. Because her cousin Ichiro was born in the United States, the farm's lease was in his name instead of his father's. Sumiko turned her attention back to the stable to check on her brother. Tok had climbed a stool and was brushing Baba's mane. Tok loved Sumiko best of anything in the world, but Sumiko thought maybe he loved the horse second best. Now she saw her grandfather walk into the outhouse. That was always the first thing he did when he finished working. "I have to start the bath water," she told Tok, who barely noticed as she hurried away. In the bathhouse, she got kindling from a pile and placed it under the big tub. She lugged a few logs off the woodpile and placed them atop the kindling and started a fire. As soon as the bath water started steaming, she would place a wooden platform in the tub so the bottom wouldn't be too hot to step in. "Sumiko-chan!" her grandfather called from the outhouse. There was a crack in the wood that he always peered out of. Sometimes he liked to talk to the family right through the outhouse wall. He had no dignity because he was so old. Still, he made Sumiko smile a lot. She ran to the outhouse. "Yes, Ji-chan." When is party? He said. I thought you didn't hear me. Whole neighborhood hear you, he said. It's Saturday. He didn't speak. Sometimes he just stopped talking, and you didn't know whether you were supposed to wait at the outhouse or not. If you asked him if he wanted you to wait outside, he would snap that you had interrupted his train of thought. If you waited without asking, he would look surprised when he came out. I thinking, maybe it better I drive you to party instead of your uncle, he suddenly said. I wait in car nearby in case you get hurt. Though Ji-chan had lived in the United States for several decades, he didn't sound like it. Sometimes he spoke Chanpan, which was a mix of Japanese and English. Sometimes he spoke Japanese, and when he talked to Sumiko and Tok-Tok, he spoke mangled English. Ji-chan already seemed as obsessed with this party as Sumiko was. Ji-chan, I'm not going to get hurt at a birthday party, she said to the outhouse. I just thinking. But if you got no respect for old man opinion, never mind, never mind. Sumiko laughed. I'm going to be fine. Maybe they'll ask me to sing a song. Was that what they did at birthday parties? She liked to sing. Once she'd even been chosen to sing a song alone during a school assembly. She'd gotten a little flustered and sung the same verse twice, but otherwise she'd done great. She imagined a crowd of classmates surrounding her at the party. Sumiko, Ji-chan said. Are you listening? Sorry, Ji-chan. What did you say? I say go get your uncle. She shouted out, Uncle, Ji-chan wants you. Uncle looked up from the fields and headed in. You break my eardrum, Ji-chan said. Sumiko returned to the bathhouse to check the water. Not hot enough yet. Went into the stable to check Tok-Tok, still brushing Baba, and hurried to the shed to grade the cut carnations Ichiro had just brought in from the field. He smiled as she passed. The shed was yet another drafty building on the farm. Empty taru, barrels, that soy sauce came in were piled on top of one another along the walls, waiting to be filled with carnations for tomorrow morning's market. Sumiko was supposed to grade the flowers and put them into the taru. That was one of her main jobs. Flower farmers charged more for their most beautiful, biggest, nearly flawless flowers. Sumiko graded the best carnations number 1 and the next best number 2. Only carnations were graded inside the shed. The stock were graded right out in the field. The worst carnations that farmers sold were splits, flowers where the calyx didn't hold the petals together right. They were still pretty, but they were bought by funeral parlors, or else cheap markets like street corner flower vendors. Ji-chan said men bought street corner flowers on the way home from work on days when their wives were mad at them. He said someday he was going to write a book of all his theories. Sometimes Sumiko slipped a number 1 flower into the splits, because she felt sorry for the poor dead people who were getting defective flowers. But she also felt guilty that a good flower might be wasted on dead people who wouldn't even notice. So either way, she felt a little bad. As she picked up the first stem from the pile, Sumiko remembered proudly how Uncle had said she was the only one in the family whose hands were both quick and gentle, perfect hands for grading. In fact, she was the only one in the family allowed to grade the carnations. That was one reason she knew how important she was to the farm. From the beginning, Uncle and Auntie had never asked her to work, but she still remembered lying in her new bedroom after her parents died, worrying that she and her brother would get sent to an orphanage. So the next day she'd gotten up and scrubbed all the floors. Ji-chan still brought it up sometimes. I remember when your parents die. All you do is scrub floor for a week. We thought you crazy. And she had not stopped working since then. She placed a batch of number 1s into the taru. Tok-Tok came in and watched her for a moment. Do you think Baba loves me or Bull or you more? He asked. Maybe she loves all of us for different reasons. Why does she love me? Because you brush her.